Welcome to episode 4 of Photosynthesis, limiting factors and compensation points. Now, consider this problem. I want to make pancakes for my dinner, because that's how I roll. To make perfect pancakes, I need 2 eggs, 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of milk. I've got 6 eggs, 4 cups of flour and 4 cups of milk. How many pancakes can I make? See if you can work it out. Have you got it? I can only make 30. And here is why. I don't have enough eggs. So, because I've only got 6 eggs, that stops me making any more pancakes. So we say that eggs are the limiting factor. Now, a limiting factor is something which slows the rate of something or stops something happening. Like, for example, photosynthesis. So this is our equation for photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide plus water uses the sun's energy. The chlorophyll traps the sunlight and converts the carbon dioxide and water into sugars, or, because we are like absolutely sick at photosynthesis by now, glucose plus oxygen. So the factors which might limit photosynthesis could be light intensity, temperature, carbon dioxide availability. The main ones that we're going to look at are light intensity and temperature. So if we want a plant to photosynthesize at its fastest rate, we need to make sure it has enough carbon dioxide and enough water. It must have enough light, and the temperature must be warm enough to allow it to photosynthesize at its fastest rate. So let's look at an example. Now here's a little graph, and this shows us how light intensity affects the rate of photosynthesis. So as we can see here, at the start, and this is a little example. So here we've got a graph of light intensity against the rate of photosynthesis. And you can clearly see that there's 2 areas here. There's a bit here and a bit here. So at position 1, the trend that we can see is as we increase light intensity, what we see is the rate of photosynthesis also increases. So therefore, at position 1, light is the limiting factor. Now the reason for that is, if we give the plant more light, it can photosynthesize more. So therefore, light must be the limiting factor. But at 2, we can still see that the light intensity is going up. Now maybe it would help if we put some numbers on this. What we can see at position 2 then is it doesn't matter if we keep increasing the light intensity. It will not increase the rate of photosynthesis. So at high light intensities or higher light intensities, the rate of photosynthesis does not increase. So that tells us that something else must be limiting. Now that might be that there's not enough CO2. It could be that there's not enough water, or it could be a low temperature. So to summarize that, as we increase the light intensity, the rate of photosynthesis increases. So that shows us that initially light intensity was a limiting factor. But at the second flatter part, it shows us that even though we give it more light, so we increase light intensity, it has no effect on the rate of photosynthesis. So something else must be limiting the rate of photosynthesis. Now this next part would show us the effect of temperature. So if we take a similar graph, where this would be light intensity, and this is the rate of photosynthesis. Let's draw a little curve. So this is what we would get. Now at position 1, the light intensity is limiting. And that's because as we increase the light intensity, the rate of photosynthesis increases. At position 2, we can see that increasing light intensity has no effect on photosynthesis. So therefore, something else is limiting. So what would happen if we increase the temperature? So let's say that this is at 10 degrees C and this is at 20 degrees C. What we can see is that when we increase the temperature, the rate of photosynthesis increases until we get to here. So if we increase temperature, the rate of photosynthesis increases until a point. That point is here, and after that, when we get to this part, something else must be limiting. Now, that could be carbon dioxide, it could be the amount of water, but it's not going to be light because we continually increase the light intensity. It could also be temperature, because as we know, plants can survive in temperatures above 20. So perhaps if we increase the temperature again, it would photosynthesize at a faster rate. But what we can definitely say is that between here and here, photosynthesis was limited by temperature. And that's because the only difference between here and here is the temperature. And when we increase the temperature, the rate of photosynthesis increases. The next factor we can look at is carbon dioxide availability. So let's take a similar graph. So we've got light intensity against rate of photosynthesis. So let's start off with a fairly standard one. So we've got position 1 and position 2. Now at 1, as light intensity increases, rate of photosynthesis increases. At 2, as light increases, there is no increase in rate of photosynthesis. Therefore, something must be limiting. Now, the limiting factor could be carbon dioxide, temperature, or water. It's not light because we're continually increasing light intensity. So, if we took one of these, like for example carbon dioxide, and we increase the amount of carbon dioxide the plant had, it would photosynthesize at a faster rate. So let's say that this, for example, is low CO2 levels, and this is a higher CO2 level. What we can see is when we give the plant more carbon dioxide, it can photosynthesize at a faster rate, which is shown by this section. But then it gets to this point where it levels off, and at this point, something else must be limiting. And that's because it has a higher level of carbon dioxide. We're continually increasing the light intensity, but yet there is no increase in the rate of photosynthesis. Now let's try and link this to real life. So, 3 limiting factors that we looked at were light intensity, temperature, and carbon dioxide availability. So what would the limiting factor be in each of these scenarios? Pause it here and see if you can work out what it could be. So pause it and try and work them out. So for each of these, clear summer day, the limiting factor, it's probably going to be carbon dioxide because it's clear, so there'd be a high light intensity. Summer, there'd be warm temperature, so it's likely to be carbon dioxide availability. At night, it's obviously going to be light. A clear winter's day, when it might be colder, might be the temperature. A warm greenhouse on a sunny day, so sunny, so there's a high light intensity. It's warm, so there's a high temperature, so it's probably going to be carbon dioxide. On a sunny day, but it snowed the night before, so it's sunny, but it snowed, so that might be temperature. Depending on how much snow there was, it might block the light getting to the plant, so it could also be light, but it's probably most likely to be temperature if it's snowing. Plant is indoor, not near a window. Light. So hopefully that gives you a more realistic view of when limiting factors might actually be affecting a plant. Now, just for the lols, this bit shows how growers might be affected by limiting factors and what they can do to combat them. So this shows a little cross section of a greenhouse, and in this greenhouse it's got good ventilation, artificial light, a sprinkler system, an oil burner, and it's the little plants growing in it. So let's look at each part. Firstly, you've got good ventilation, which allows oxygen in so the plants can respire. Remember, they're living things, so they need oxygen to respire. They've got a little oil burner. So we said one of the limiting factors could be carbon dioxide and another one could be temperature. So the little oil burners produce carbon dioxide, which the plant can use for photosynthesis. And because it's a burner, it also increases the temperature and allows the rate of photosynthesis to speed up. We've then got an artificial light, which increases the light intensity, and fertilizer, which provide the plants with minerals for growth, and also a sprinkler system, which is used to provide water. So we said that the three limiting factors could be light, and they make sure that's not limiting by, first of all, having it in a glass house, and second of all, having an artificial light to increase the light intensity. A second limiting factor was carbon dioxide, so they use an oil burner to produce excess carbon dioxide. And the third limiting factor could be temperature. So again, the oil burner speeds it up. As well as that, greenhouses are naturally quite warm. Now let's have a little look at this sketch that I've drawn. So down at the bottom, again we've got light intensity, and at the side we've got rate of photosynthesis. Now, if we just focus on the very bottom curve here, what we can see is that as we increase the light intensity, the rate of photosynthesis increases until it begins to level off. Now, at this first one, so let's say the red curve that we've drawn is the first one. At this, we've got 0.02% carbon dioxide and 10 degrees C. So we could say here that our limiting factors could be temperature, carbon dioxide, or they might be water. But it is not light. And the reason for that is we're continually increasing light intensity, and it has no effect on the rate of photosynthesis. So what we do next is we look at the second curve. It has the same amount of CO2, but the temperature's been increased, and the effect is that at this point it increases the rate of photosynthesis. So therefore that we can say there that the limiting factor, or one of the limiting factors, was temperature, because when we increase the temperature, the rate of photosynthesis increases. The amount of carbon dioxide is the same, so initially it wasn't limiting. But we get to here, and we've got 0.02% carbon dioxide at 20 degrees C. If we increase the amount of carbon dioxide up to here, we can see that at this point, the rate of photosynthesis increases. So therefore, between here and here, the amount of carbon dioxide was limiting. Now what we can see is, if we were comparing the first one to the third one, we can see that both carbon dioxide and temperature were limiting, because when we increase the amount of carbon dioxide and the temperature, the rate of photosynthesis increases by much, much more. So what we need to think about whenever we're comparing these is what has changed, and if they've changed something and it's increased the rate of photosynthesis, that means it was limiting. And that's the end of limiting factors. I hope you had as much fun as I did.